Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I've actually been working in the energy efficiency and renewable at the residential and small commercial field for several years, and was instrumental in getting the first commercial residential net zero energy buildings in New York State. The big problem that I'm run into, smack up hard, is that the appraisers have no guidance in how they should value these improvements. And it's to the point that we had a willing buyer, we had a willing bank, we had agreed to price, and the appraiser came in and said that the 8 kW of solar, the geothermal, and the net zero energy building had a total excess value of $7,000. And it turns out that the problem is that they have no guidance, right? It's not their fault. They don't have, and what they've said to me is, we don't have a piece of paper that we can look to be able to give this valuation. And I actually have developed a business plan for existing structures, doing deep energy retrofits, bringing in solar, geothermal, PV, and so forth. And the problem that I have is I can't get banks. I got banks that want to participate, but they don't have a way to get past the appraisal problem. And so the real question is there a way that this can happen at the state level where the appraisers can actually be able to give a good evaluation? Because, for instance, if a 30-year mortgage could be put on a house, I can actually bring that house in net zero energy, and the person from that day on pays less than they were paying before. But if I can't get the 30-year mortgage, I can't do the work.
Yeah, I'll start. I think that's very interesting, and hopefully as we have more penetration of solar and geothermal and battery storage, that will become a bigger issue. But I really think, I'm glad you brought it to our attention, we need to work with the Office of Real Property Services, ORPS, to kind of get some training for the assessors so they know, and I'd be happy to talk to you and give you my card. I know the folks down there, I've worked with them on other issues. That's going to be a new area, and you're right, they don't have guidance, so they don't know what to do with it.
The problem's even broader than just the appraisers. The banks, you can go to the banks, we need to find a way of quantifying the economic values associated with the investments in things like efficiency and renewables in a way that the bank can then internalize that cost in a language that they understand. And right now, they don't. We have a couple of projects that we have under consideration that are designed to develop the database. In fact, we actually have a pretty good database at NYSERDA based upon a number of the energy efficiency programs we've operated over the years. In some ways, it's almost a wealth of data, and we're looking at ways of taking that data and, in fact, reformulating or retranslating it into a different language that bankers can understand so that they'll have a better appreciation for the real value associated with these investments. So I think there's a lot of things that need to be done, but it all eventually translates into educating the banking community, the appraisers, and actually there are other actors in this process as well.
I'll just add a couple of quick points. First, I'll take a cue from Frank, and Pradeep mentioned I'm on the board of the New York Solar Energy Society. Wilden Fishman is here. She's the chair of the board. And NYSES also does these kind of trainings. The story you're telling actually, 10, 15 years ago, the story was the building code inspector doesn't know what to do.
Right.
And so at the time I was with NESE over in Massachusetts, and we started to run education programs, just like what Carol's talking about. And NYSES is in actually a nice position to consider that as part of our portfolio of programs that we might offer as well. But I guess the other thing that I'll say is that, again, looking at the public policy that's behind the technology, in Germany, because of the assurance of a 20-year fixed rate, the ratepayers are now taken out of the business of financing renewable energy. It's the banks that loan the money. And the reason to do the systems, there's no tax credits in Germany. The banks loan the money because they have confidence that but there's a revenue stream associated with the installation of that system. So that's another way of getting at the same problem, I think. But you know, it's a constant effort to continually provide education to all sectors of society. That's what you're experiencing.
A related question I have, which is looking at it from a much higher view, is should the state be doing this, or should this be a federal initiative? Germany does this as a country. I mean, or should it be the municipality that does it? What's the right answer to that one?
I don't know if I know the right answer, but I couldn't resist the temptation to say that sometimes the best thing for the states is for the federal government to get out of the way. There are times when having the federal government involved, and a wonderful example, again, is the grant that you just received last week. I think the federal government has an important role to play, and I applaud President Obama in pushing this whole concept of innovation. Many of the major engines of innovation in our economy over the last couple of decades really, so some people don't want to acknowledge this, find their roots investments, research investments by the federal government. So I think there's a very appropriate role for the federal government to play in regard to something like that. But I'll give you a good example of how the federal government's involvement has frustrated exactly what this gentleman was talking about, and that's when we're talking about PACE loans. We would like to do property assessment loans here in New York State. And we are thwarted in our efforts to do so because of federal governmental policies. And again, what's particularly ironic is it's not President Obama and it's the White House, it's some other federal entity that has made its pronouncements about the relationship of these PACE financings and mortgages and what you can and cannot do. The bottom line of which is it's frustrated a very important tool that could be available to the states to, in effect, internalize the cost and the benefits of energy efficiency in a way that the banking community understands.
I would just say if, you know, we hold our breath for the feds to act, then we're going to be in the same place that, you know, we are right now. So I think the states have to take the lead. I also have a concern too when you have states in the Northeast that have pretty progressive efficiency and renewable energy goals. If you do something on a national level, it could get way watered down. I mean, you look at where renewable energy is in terms of the states, and there's a significant portion that's missing, and that's in the South. They're just barely starting, so it would be my concern that, you know, if we wait for the feds to do something, we could get something that's really watered down. And, you know, we're ahead of the curve, and hopefully with some progressive policies, we'll start to catch up to the other states, so I wouldn't wait on the feds.
When I worked with Atlantis, I had just an excellent, unique opportunity because Atlantis is down in Poughkeepsie, New York. They make building integrated modules, and we were buying our cells from Q-Cells. At the time, they were on their way, and for a brief period, were the largest solar cell manufacturer in the world. And they'd always come over, and they'd be like, yeah, why don't you pass the feed-in tariff, right? And get the federal government to do it. Well, the reality is that we don't regulate our utilities here the same way they do. Most of our regulation occurs at the state level. You know, the FERC is there, but that's for crossing state lines. Most of America's public policies with respect to energy are implemented at the state level, and that's part of what's going on there. I guess the other thing that I would just mention is that, you know, even then there can be problems. You know, I showed the slide of Italy, where somehow they misplaced 4,000 megawatts of solar. They originally reported 1.3 gigawatts, and it turned out to be over 5 gigawatts. And it's a success, but the utilities in Italy, Enel in particular, scared the government into thinking there was going to be tremendous, terrible rate impacts as a result of this. So disastrously for this company that I'm working with, at least in the short term, the Berlusconi government shut down the feed-in tariff program in Italy. It's about to be reopened right now, but Enel announced that this terrible, supply of renewable energy was just going to be so bad for Italy. They announced in January, February timeframe that they would come up with a plan. While the government was revising the feed-in tariff, they would come up with a plan to provide safe, affordable, and reliable electricity for all of Italy. a new nuclear power program. Fukushima has completely put this to rest now, so the Italians are now coming out with a much stronger national policy.
Frank, you want to make a comment there?
Yeah, it was just, I don't disagree with anything said up there, but the Department of Energy does have program offices in solar, fuel cells, energy efficiency, and they have sub-programs that deal with market transformation, which is trying to eliminate the technical and non-technical barriers to adoption of new technologies. So I don't know about the solar office and what they're getting involved in, but I know from the fuel cell standpoint, we are getting involved in financing issues, appraisal issues, insurance issues. So I gotta imagine that there's somebody in the solar program office who's trying to help eliminate a barrier that's hurting commercialization of a clean technology.
So you're saying the federal government is trying to help across the
Yeah,
board?
I'm sure that there's somebody in the solar office that would have responsibility for that.
Yes.
Tom, you mentioned in your presentation that there was some pushback by the utilities for ownership of generation. Can you elaborate on that? I'm a little surprised that, given this would be a way for them to get back into ownership of generation. I'm just curious, not only about solar, but just perhaps RPS technologies in general. Do you see that across the board with the utilities?
Well, actually, with respect to the specifics, I think actually Carol's probably in a better position to respond to that. But what I was saying is that they had come out earlier this year saying that they were opposed to the bill, which included a 25% slice for them. So that's what I was talking about.
Yeah, I would also say too that I know that the independent power producers are very opposed to having that piece in there, and it didn't really seem to help. The utilities have not seemed like they're all that interested, although recently Con Ed did file with the Public Service Commission to allow one of their subsidiaries, Con Ed Solution, to actually go out and build 100 megawatts of solar, so maybe they're not that disinterested.
Well, I don't know about the particular provisions in the SREC bill and why the utilities would feel one way or the other about it. I do know we've been approached, we administer the renewable portfolio standard. We've been approached by a couple of utilities who are indeed interested and would love to see the renewable portfolio standard program opened up so that they could participate in that program. It may be the particular mechanism, maybe the particular cost that makes them feel one way about one approach versus another. And what I just said doesn't necessarily represent the view across the industry. Even with what I said, the view of IPNI still remains the same, whether it's the renewable portfolio standard or SREC. They're not interested in seeing the utilities owning generation, even if it's solar panels on people's roofs.
Mr. Murray, you had said you were encouraging ways that small businesses can be helped by NYSERDA's policies. I'm a local solar installer, and I participate in the NYSERDA PV incentive program. And there's one policy that, if it was modified, would really help small installers or any installation company of mine. I get calls from people who have existing solar arrays at their house or their business that they received incentives under the previous ponds from NYSERDA, and they're hoping to expand their system to offset more of their consumption. And they're not eligible under the new pond for incentives that they've participated in the previous ones. So they're not expanding their arrays. So that's one of the difficulties I'm seeing out in the field with people. And something that NYSERDA would do, they would expand their systems.
Good, well, thank you. It's interesting. That's the second time I've heard this in 2 weeks. I heard this down when I was at Ulster County Community College with Mike Tucker about a week or so ago. Another gentleman who's engaged in the same business came up to me and expressed the same concern. So, I'll talk to Jeff. I'm sure we have an answer, but certainly we can always look anew at some of these policies that we have.